A laboratory buried more than a kilometer beneath South Dakota is at the forefront of major scientific research. Why is this subterranean facility considered a gold mine among researchers?
And coming underground, we're trying to understand the deepest mysteries in the universe today.
Hidden under a London suburb, a labyrinth of tunnels with an incredible story to tell. How has its purpose morphed over the past 100 years? And what legendary covert operation was conducted here in World War II?
The Germans knew something was here. He fed them lie after lie.
And in Copenhagen, this vast subterranean space once helped save the lives of millions in the 19th century. Now, over 150 years later, why are people suddenly lining up to get inside?
You sail into the darkness where nothing can escape, not even the light can escape.
Beneath our feet lie extraordinary subterranean spaces.
We're miles away from civilization down here.
Caves, mines, and networks of tunnels.
The jewel in the crown for underground technology.
Some designed and built by humans. Others formed by nature over millions of years. How were they created and adapted? By whom and why?
If the enemy takes one section, he's not able to stand down there and shoot into the other section.
Throughout history, life underground has captured our imagination.
It creates very frightening but also very beautiful experience.
Now we're taking you further and deeper.
There's all kinds of wild theories about what could be below.
To unearth the mysteries, the secrets, and the wonders of these underground worlds. Located 15,000 meters under the Black Hills of South Dakota, scientists are unearthing answers to the most fundamental questions about our existence.
We're hiding a mile underground at this low level.
But before this world-leading research laboratory began investigating the mysteries of the universe, it was known as the Homestake Mine, one of the largest gold mines in the world.
This mine was the cutting edge of its time.
What technological advancements did engineers achieve over 125 years ago that keep it operating today?
There's a lot of difficult engineering that goes into creating a space like this.
And how close are scientists to making an earth-shattering breakthrough? Prospectors once flocked to Lead City, with their picks in tow on the hunt for precious metal. But times changed, and Lead is now better known for groundbreaking research into particle physics. Its transition from the Homestake Gold Mine to the Sanford Underground Research Facility, or SURF, was rather surprising. In the 1960s, Dr. Ray Davis, a chemist from Brookhaven National Laboratory, identified the mine as the ideal location to establish his solar neutrino experiment. Once referred to as ghost particles, these elusive neutrinos originate from the sun during the nuclear fusion process. Mark Hanhart is an experiment support scientist in Lead and has followed Davis's research.
So if you were to take every atom in the universe, so I'm talking about every atom in your body, every atom in the world, every atom in the galaxy, and break them down into the protons and the neutrons and the electrons, the number of neutrinos in the universe would still outnumber those by 1 billion to 1.
The trouble is, they're almost impossible to detect.
A neutrino doesn't have an electric charge. It doesn't couple to the electromagnetic field, so it passes through normal matter. Passes through you and me. It passes through even the mile of rock that we have overhead. And they're incredibly, incredibly hard to detect.
And the only way to find them was to go underground.
Ray Davis came up with the brilliant idea of coming underground to block out cosmic rays, to study the reactions that take place inside the sun.
By going underground, Davis was able to avoid cosmic ray interactions that could affect his results.
And that's something that you can't do on the surface, because the surface is constantly bombarded with cosmic rays coming from the sun, from the upper atmosphere, from intergalactic sources, also coming from cell towers, radio towers. Even human beings put off a level of radioactivity. They would overwhelm the signals that we're trying to pick up with these incredibly sensitive detectors. So our entire goal in coming underground is to escape all the noise on the surface.
When Ray Davis first started working on his experiment, Homestake was still an active mine.
Getting down here meant that he had to fit the schedule of the mine itself. He had to be down here when they were blasting in areas that were not too far away.
Davis came up with a clever way to search for neutrinos using a chemical compound similar to dry cleaning fluid.
Now we're in the lower Davis cavern. This is the same space that Ray Davis started installing his equipment in 1965.
Davis set up a large tank of chlorine-rich liquid in the hope that some of the neutrinos would interact with some of the chlorine atoms and form argon atoms. By counting the argon atoms, the number of neutrinos coming from the sun could be detected. However, an interesting thing happened when Davis searched for those solar neutrinos. Only about a third of the predicted number were detected. This anomaly became known as the solar neutrino problem. Ultimately, Davis's experiment was considered a major scientific breakthrough, and he was awarded the Nobel Prize for identifying different flavors or types of neutrinos.
His experiment was incredibly successful. It introduced one of the most important and lasting mysteries in physics.
But long before the scientists made their home here, the mining industry created the groundwork for everything that would eventually become possible. During the 1870s, prospectors arrived ready to make their fortune in the Black Hills gold rush.
The Homestake mine became one of the longest enduring gold mines and oldest gold mine listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
David Vardaman is a former Homestake miner who now works at the Sanford Underground Research Facility.
45 years ago, as a college student, I went to work for Homestake Mining Company. We had just reached the 8,000 foot level, and my area of responsibility was the mapping and geologic control and identifying locations of ore in the deep underground for the Homestake mine.
But working 2.5 kilometers underground is no easy task.
The 8,000 foot level is 132 degrees Fahrenheit rock temperatures. So it's a lot of challenges on ventilation, hoisting, personnel, equipment, you name it. This mine was the cutting edge of its time.
Over 125 years, miners pulled more than 40 million ounces of gold from the mine. A seemingly limitless amount of riches was buried in the ground, just waiting to be unearthed. But in 2002, that limit was reached, and the mine was forced to close because of high production costs. But it was not forgotten. 5 years later, new life was resurfacing at Homestake Mine. But instead of hunting for gold, advocates for underground science were determined to shed light on one of the biggest mysteries in the universe. After over a century of lucrative gold production, the Homestake mine in South Dakota took on a whole new purpose. In 2007, the Homestake mine transitioned into a dedicated underground research lab called the Sanford Underground Research Facility, or SURF, designed to answer some of the universe's biggest mysteries. Above ground, the original mining equipment is still operating and is currently the main mode of transportation in and out of the lab.
When one cage is going down, the other one is coming up. 77,000 pounds worth of weight that this hoist mechanism is pulling up. This is a vintage piece of hoist gear. You will not see these running other than in museums. Yet here it has been rebuilt, maintained to support science, cutting-edge science with 1930 vintage technology.
Now, a new kind of mining is taking place.
We're looking to understand certain properties of the neutrino that make them really important to our story for how we came to be in the universe. We're trying to understand if neutrinos are their own antiparticles. And if they are, that would explain a big chunk of what's missing from the current Big Bang theory.
Even though dark matter makes up nearly 85% of all matter in the universe, we don't really know much about it. What we do know is that it exists, based on the impact it has on the universe.
We notice things like gravitational lensing, which is areas in the universe where we have intense gravity that actually bends light, according to Einstein's general theory of relativity, but we don't see the mass that's there in order to generate that gravity. We don't see what's actually bending the light.
Some researchers believe the leading candidate for a dark matter particle is a WIMP, a weakly interacting massive particle. Because WIMPs interact so weakly with ordinary matter, they are extremely hard to detect.
Even though we don't know what a WIMP is exactly, because we've never seen one, we do know, based on the properties that we've derived from what dark matter does in the universe, what that fingerprint should look like.
In a series of experiments, Cerf attempted to prove the existence of WIMPs. In 2012, they installed the Large Underground Xenon, or LUX experiment. The detector is filled with xenon, a cool, dense liquid chemical, which is surrounded by sensors. The sensors can detect tiny flashes of light and electrical charges emitted if a WIMP collides with a xenon atom.
And the idea is that as dark matter passes through the Earth, and it passes through this lab, and it passes through you and me, and it passes through our detector, 1 out of a billion times, one of those particles is going to interact with the nucleus of a xenon atom, which is the heart of our detector.
Unfortunately, after 4 years, LUX was unable to detect any WIMPs. However, its high levels of insulation meant it was recognized as the quietest detector in the world.
We were more sensitive while we were running than any other dark matter experiment on the Earth. So we didn't see anything, but we didn't see it better than anyone's never not seen it before.
But Cerf didn't give up. The facility upgraded and replaced LUX with the LUX Zeppelin, or LZ project, in 2016, aiming to identify WIMPs.
We've taken all the lessons we learned from running LUX and made it into something so much more incredibly complex, so much more bulletproof.
LUX Zeppelin's different systems need to run in harmony.
We have a lot of data acquisitions and electronic systems that are designed specifically for taking the data from the detector and making it something that we can analyze a lot more easily. We have to have a lot of these subsystems created by collaboration universities around the world. They then ship those systems to us, and we very carefully bring them underground, and then we have to marry them all together.
Piecing together the puzzle is just the beginning. For this highly advanced equipment to work properly, these machines need to be clean on a molecular level.
There's a lot of stuff that is radioactive that we could accidentally introduce to the experiments, including dust, which often contains uranium and thorium, which are radioactive elements.
HEPA filters purify the air that comes from the surface. This ensures the campus itself is a super clean area. To keep the researchers from contaminating the highly sensitive experiments, they must dress for the occasion.
So this room is a clean room. Extremely clean environment, hence we've sealed ourselves into these suits because you're shedding particles, you're shedding skin, you're shedding hair, you're shedding dust. So you want to keep everything inside, plus a mask and the hood to keep all the particles that come out when you talk.
Research scientist Cabot Ann Christofferson is used to working in restricted conditions.
We actually do all the assembly for the experiment inside the glove box, which is even cleaner.
The particle count inside a glove box is typically 0, creating the cleanest, deepest underground workspace on Earth. The conditions are strictly controlled.
No humidity, no oxygen, only nitrogen, which, prevents corrosion. We're hiding a mile underground at this low level. Plus, we've surrounded ourselves with low radiation concrete, and then the rock naturally is low radiation for this area in South Dakota.
SURF is now taking part in the largest neutrino project ever, DUNE, or Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment. It's designed to investigate how neutrinos automatically change as they travel, becoming a different type of neutrino or flavor every few hundred kilometers. These will be giant steps for science and could drastically revolutionize tomorrow's energy, environmental, medical, and industrial processes.
The DUNE is made up of more than 1,000 scientists spread over more than 175 different institutions in over 60 countries.
Project manager Joshua Wilhite is overseeing construction in South Dakota. Nearly 750,000 tons of rock will be excavated from the underground cavern, making way for a new scientific facility. Massive machines drill into the rock, and explosives are then inserted in a specific pattern calculated by computer. Heavy blast doors protect the workers from the powerful explosions needed to clear the rock. A major challenge facing engineers is how to remove thousands of tons of debris from a building site a kilometer below the surface.
Right now I'm standing on top of what's called conveyor CV04. We need to transport this rock from the crushing system on out to the open cut.
400 tons of rock can be transported every hour.
We're moving a total of a little over 800,000 tons of rock for this project, which sounds like a big number, but when you compare that to what the gold mine used to do, it's less than 1 year of production for the gold mine.
After the chambers have been excavated, the mammoth systems need to be installed deep below the ground.
Every single piece of material that goes into building the experiment is going to pass through this little shaft. And I say little, this is 5 feet wide and about 13 feet deep. That's it. That's all the space we've got.
At Fermilab, near Chicago, a new particle accelerator will send the laboratory's high-energy beam of neutrinos 13,000 kilometers through the Earth from Illinois to South Dakota.
We are in a sweet spot of distance from Fermilab to study neutrino oscillations. And that's how neutrinos actually change flavors as they travel through time and space. We're exactly one oscillation between flavors away from Fermilab here.
Searching for particles that are nearly undetectable requires extremely powerful equipment.
The biggest part is actually excavating these large caverns. And when I say large, these are 65 feet wide, 90 feet tall, and almost 500 feet long for the detectors. And these are unprecedented at this depth in the world.
The neutrinos will then be intercepted at SURF by massive vats of supercooled liquid called cryostats. Once installed, each of the 4 giant cryostats will contain 10,000 tons of liquid argon, which needs to be kept below minus 185 degrees. This former gold mine has already played host to some of the most extraordinary science of the modern era. But the ambition and vision of this new experiment is nothing short of inspiring. Once DUNE is fully operational, the world's scientific community will be watching.
I think that Ray Davis would be thrilled at the idea that what he started in 1965 has turned into this massive underground laboratory for studying the deepest mysteries that we know of in the universe today.
Buried 30 meters below this quiet London suburb is a vast subterranean world, steeped in both history
Flint could be sold to gunsmiths to make muskets and pistols.
and mystery.
These 9 ledges are believed to have been sacrificial altars.
How did the tunnels evolve into one of Britain's best-kept military secrets?
The Germans knew something was here. He fed them lie after lie.
It grew to 15,000 people at the height of the Blitz, like an underground town.
For centuries, humans have been exploring the depths of Chiselhurst caves. 30 meters below the bustling suburb of Chiselhurst itself, stretching for 36 kilometers, these tunnels and caverns are entirely man-made and were initially constructed to mine flint deposits within the London chalk layers. Historians have been debating their origins for years.
Some people believe that these tunnels go even further back to Roman times and even the Druids.
According to legend, the first phase of the caves was created by members of the Druids, an ancient Celtic culture.
This particular part of the cave system is known as the middle section, or the Druid section.
In 1903, one man set out on a quest to uncover the cave's true story. During the Victorian era, Dr. William Nichols produced several theories about who carved out this subterranean space, including one that supported the Druid claim.
The Druids of the Celtic people, they were the lawmakers and givers. They were the doctors of sorts, or shaman, if you will. They were a polytheistic religion. They worshipped many gods. We're going a long way back, 3,000 to 4,000 years old.
Although there are few written accounts on Druids, historians believe their religion involved the natural world and its powers.
In front of us is a ledge, and it's one of 9 ledges at Chiselhurst Caves. These 9 ledges are believed to have been sacrificial altars used by the Druids. But this 9th altar, this is where Dr. Nichols believed human sacrifice took place.
Another one of Dr. Nichols' theories was that the extensive mine tunnels could have also been built by the Romans.
This painting depicts how Dr. William Nichols believed that the Romans removed chalk in the ancient times.
Dr. Nichols' claims generated a lot of public debate, and soon the caves drew in many curious Victorian tourists looking for evidence.
People used to come down here looking for Roman remains.
But the reality turned out to be quite different from Dr. Nichols' tales. The first mention of the Chiselhurst caves was found in medieval documents dating to the middle of the 13th century. The charter mentions that the caves were mined for chalk and flint.
We're in one of the earliest sets of tunnels left from the ancient mining.
Archaeologist Rod Laguerre is an expert on the history of this subterranean world and its geology.
Chalk is comprised of millions and millions and millions of tiny, tiny fossilised sea creatures. They've died, went to the bottom of the sea, and slowly it built up this sludge, which eventually solidified and became chalk. This one probably started just about the turn of the 17th century.
Laguerre has studied the style of excavation and the markings on the chalk walls to accurately date them.
At some point, while the mine was being dug, somebody left their mark on the walls here. There are dates from 1727 and 1737.
He has been cautious not to misinterpret the origins of the tunnels like the more sensational Dr. Nichols.
Now, graffiti is a bit difficult because you can put anything on the wall at any time. For instance, in one part of the mine, somebody has found 1066 William, which is perhaps a little dubious. But the style of the letters here is about correct for that time. Just simple hand tools. You can see where the mark's been left by the miner hitting the pick here and pulling away the chalk. It's much wider at the base than the normal picks that we get today. One of the things that you can date the tunnels with is the pick marks.
Excavating chalk required an advanced level of engineering expertise.
Chalk is relatively soft, quite easy to dig. That leaves some problems in that if you're not careful, if you don't dig it properly, the roof is liable to fall in on you, which is a bad idea.
These early miners had a foolproof plan.
Towards the roof, the wall is arched in to take the load off the roof. The bottom, it also arches in, which gives a very strong profile, so the roof stays up.
While Dr. Nichols' writings from the Victorian era describe the chalk platforms as serving mystical purposes, Rod believes they were far more functional.
He said that these platforms were Druids' altars. They have a much more practical application. If you imagine that I'm an old miner with a pickaxe in my hand, I cannot reach the roof. The miner would be on the platform where he could cut away with his pick, then cut the bench back 2 or 3 metres, always leaving a space to stand on so the tunnel could be driven forward.
The chalk that was extracted for this system of underground tunnels had 2 very distinct uses.
The earliest reason man dug chalk out of the ground was for agriculture. If the subsoil was acidic, then an application of crushed chalk on it, which is alkaline, combat the acid, and the crops would grow better.
By the 1700s, a new use for chalk had been found and demand was growing fast.
It was used for building, to make lime mortar. Before the days you could buy cement, you had to make your own by mixing lime, sand, etc. to make lime mortar.
From the 1700s, many of the local suburbs of London were built with chalk from Chiselhurst. Miners also found another resource buried within the cave wall.
You'll notice large bands of flint, these black lumps which are in the wall. To the miners, initially they were a pain in the bum because when you hit them, they shattered and sent off sharp bits out.
However, the resourceful miners found a profitable use for the flint.
They could be sold to gunsmiths to make gun flints for the old muskets and pistols.
By the early 20th century, the tunnels took on a completely new role and embraced a covert way of life. When World War II broke out in 1939, locals burrowed into Chiselhurst caves and used them as an emergency shelter, including the family of the current owner, Jim Gardner.
The public took over and set up home down here. Some of the caves were totally furnished. There were double beds and wardrobes and chest of drawers.
For more than 8 months, nearly 15,000 people from East London made the caves their home. As the German Air Force dropped bombs from above, the residents were building an entire city below the ground. By the peak of the Blitz, the caves had electricity, running water, and an air ventilation system. There was also a fully operational hospital.
There was a fear that with a large number of people concentrated underground that there would be contagious diseases and severe illness. But there were no serious diseases, no serious outbreaks of anything.
Soon, Chiselhurst contained so many amenities, the tunnels became known as the Chiselhurst Hotel.
This was the largest of 4 canteens which were operated throughout the war. Tea then was almost sacred. A hot cup of tea was the answer to everybody's problems. There were shops built, a library, church, various offices.
There was also a system for identifying potential attacks.
the main entrance, there was a big sign coloured green, amber and red. And if it was green, then fine, you could go in and out. If it was amber, there was a possibility of an air raid just about to commence. And if it was red, nobody went out.
During the final stages of World War II, Chiselhurst Caves played their most covert and famous role to date, when a Spanish spy served as a double agent. Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, made history when he orchestrated one of the most successful operations against Nazi Germany.
He worked for the UK government, MI5, but every single thing he told the Germans was a lie.
Previously, during World War I, munitions from the nearby Woolwich Arsenal were stored in Chiselhurst Caves. By World War II, they no longer served that purpose. But nevertheless, Garbo planted this lie with the Nazis to deceive them.
The Germans knew something was here because of World War I. Garbo used that same story in World War II to misdirect them.
The true genius of Garbo's lie was that the caves couldn't be detected from above ground, so the Germans never really knew where the alleged weapons were stored, which kept the subterranean refugees safe from harm.
You can't see any of this from an aerial view. Where would the Germans bomb? They had no idea where it was, how large it was, how many tunnels there were, or where they actually went.
Several major victories are due to Garbo's success as a double agent. The first of these were the Operation Torch landings in North Africa on November the 8th, 1942. The Allied forces planned to invade with Dwight D. Eisenhower as supreme commander. Prior to the mission, Garbo sent a coded letter through the mail to German intelligence with all the details of the operation. However, he cleverly sent it out, knowing it would arrive after the operation on November the 8th.
And it built his credibility with the Germans. And the Germans would believe just about anything.
He even fooled them about the D-Day landings.
When he told them that D-Day was actually happening in a different place along the coast of France, they believed him.
This is the day for which free people long have waited. This is D-Day.
By the 1960s, the caves evolved once again from a secret military bunker into an unlikely concert venue.
Rock bands started to perform like The Who, the Yardbirds, the Kinks, Jimi Hendrix, David Bowie, Mick Jagger and the Stones. Some of the names of the bands are on the walls here. We've got T-Rex on this side. On the other side, we've got Toto. We've got the Trogs. A piece of rock and roll history.
Today, the colorful history of Chiselhurst Caves is still very much alive. Who knows what the future may hold for this legendary subterranean tunnel system? The best may still be yet to come. Concealed beneath the streets of Copenhagen, Denmark, lies a shadowy underground world.
When you flow into the darkness here, it creates sort of a very frightening but also very beautiful experience.
This massive subterranean network helped bring an end to a devastating epidemic that threatened the city.
Copenhagen was a time bomb waiting to happen.
Yet today, these cryptic spaces have taken on a completely new function.
It was full of water until about 40 years ago, when somebody remembered that these cisterns were here.
What techniques did the engineers use over a century ago that allowed the caverns to stand the test of time? And what amazing scientific discoveries were recently unearthed here?
It's quite strange to think that a beautiful place like this was never intended for anyone to see.
Located deep beneath Copenhagen's bustling city streets is a massive subterranean cavern hidden away from daylight. Today, over 1 million people call this vibrant city home. But in the 1800s, Copenhagen looked very different.
Copenhagen was more like a medieval town than a city on the verge of modernity. It was a time bomb waiting to happen. Infrastructure was extremely poor. The sewers were just small canals in the sides of the streets.
Thomas Rees Jensen is an expert on the history of this site.
In the 1850s, around 150,000 people lived in Copenhagen, and they all lived inside the old fortification system, approximately 2 square miles.
Before this underground space was modernized, Copenhagen had some major water problems.
Clean drinking water was pumped in from the lakes surrounding Copenhagen, just a few hundred meters away. Human waste, along with animal waste and even industrial waste, would all be gathered in these open sewers and just flow away.
The 19th century water systems were leaking into each other, drinking water into wastewater, and wastewater contaminating the drinking water. By 1853, with the water heavily polluted, a catastrophic epidemic claimed the lives of more than 4,700 residents.
Cholera's disease had spread throughout Europe. It reached Copenhagen during the summer month when it was at the warmest, and you can imagine the smells in the city.
The epidemic spread like wildfire across the densely packed city.
Throughout just a couple of months, almost 5,000 people died in Copenhagen. If you compare it to the population of the time, 150,000 people, that is about 1 out of 30 people, a really high death rate.
The city needed to come up with a plan to create a new drinking water system, and fast. So, a decision was made to build a network of underground reservoirs large enough to store clean water.
The entire system of water infrastructure in Copenhagen was built in only 2 years, between the years of 1856 to 1858. The cisterns would provide drinking water for up to 2 days for the entire city of Copenhagen back then.
Originally, the reservoir was an open pool of water. But to minimize the chances of pollution and infection, engineers decided to make a few upgrades in 1889.
The place consists of 3 equally large spaces. The columns down here, all 280 of them, are built with bricks. Between them you have these massive arches, and then on top of that, the roof above us is a concrete cast with a capacity of up to 4 million gallons of water. It's quite a big mystery why the place was built the way it was. When we have engineers visiting us today, they say that the structure is way too strong than what it needed to be. We have to keep in mind, though, that the techniques used were fairly new when the structure was built, so I guess they would rather be safe than sorry.
Due in part to the skills implemented by the cistern's engineers, the cholera outbreak was stopped in its tracks.
From the 1850s, cholera was never a problem in Copenhagen. So the cisterns and the greater infrastructure of water had proved itself to work.
By the 20th century, as new water purification techniques developed and modern water storage facilities were built, the vast underground cisterns were no longer needed. That's when the space began to take on a life of its own.
That creates sort of a very frightening but also very beautiful experience.
By 1933, the city of Copenhagen had completely stopped using the once life-saving cistern. In 1981, they were drained and abandoned. 15 years later, the cisterns quenched a new thirst for scientific exploration.
I actually vividly remember seeing the first photo that was in a newspaper when somebody remembered that these cisterns were here and reopened them and brought up these photos of these absolutely amazing structures.
Professor Minik Rosing is a geologist at Copenhagen University and perhaps an unlikely advocate for this underground lair.
It's a wonderful place because we don't have such places in Denmark at all.
Given its flat terrain and proximity to water, Denmark isn't commonly known for its geological discoveries. But when the Cisternen was converted into a museum in 1996, a remarkable find was made, and soon geologists started paying attention.
It was full of water until about 40 years ago when it was emptied, and it's beautiful because it's a piece of almost geology.
Stalagmites and stalactites have begun forming here, just like they do in caves around the world. But here, the timeline for growth is much faster.
We know when the water was drained out of the cisterns, and these things could not have formed when it was full of water. So you can see one of these things is almost like a tree upside down, and inside it would have a structure like tree rings. So if you put it under the microscope, you would see layers formed through this past 40 years.
And it's not just geologists who are experiencing the perks of this cavernous world.
This is not a place that an art curator would normally work.
Astrid Lecoeur is a curator at the Cisternen. She's seen firsthand the ups and downs this environment has on the art.
Well, to work here is a challenge, to put it mildly. It's not at all what you think of as a normal art gallery space. Normally you work with white walls and a lot of light and climate control. Down here you have humidity just below 100% and there's no daylight.
Despite the unusual setting, many artists have created inspired installations with a strong focus on the atmosphere being its canvas. Thomas Saraceno, an Argentinian artist responsible for the latest exhibition, has taken that to heart and has changed even how guests move around in the space.
This exhibition is very different from other art exhibitions because you have to experience this from a boat. You sail into the darkness, and the title of the exhibition is Event Horizon, which is the rim of the black holes in the universe where nothing can escape, not even the light can escape. It creates sort of very frightening but also very beautiful experience.
This installation required the reflooding of the cisterns, and what was revealed afterwards was unlike anything Professor Rosing had seen before.
Water that's standing here is rich in carbon dioxide, and the water coming from below is rich in calcium, and these two things have basically met the love of their life and formed the limestone when they met.
The new formations, called helictites, are rare calcifications, similar to those on the ceilings and floors of the cistern.
Geology has one fundamental rule that we let us guide by, and that we say the present is a key to the past. So to understand things that happened in Earth's past history, we have to see them unfold themselves in the present.
Whether through artistic creation or scientific observation, the cisterns continue to broaden the minds of those who visit.